what we're about today is to use a little bit of Maths-Whizz, but really to give you an insight into TED and my own teaching, and really a focus on data and how that data informs our teaching. Quick question, what would you see as some of the major problems facing you in the classroom today? Sorry? Spread of the needs in the class. Cool. Time? Time to do your job. Great.
Just at my school, we do like one term is add, addition, subtraction, and next term is multi-div, and then like definitely with national standards, I know we've got overall teacher judgment, but we focus a lot on addition, subtraction.
Right.
And that's sort of like the one.
What about the rest of the
What
curriculum?
about the rest of them? And then
Okay.
do we spend enough time in the other areas?
Cool.
5, and I did 4 years.
Using your IT more efficiently. So I think that in the next 50 minutes or so, we will address each of those issues. Okay, so this is where our focus is not on throwing technology and throwing a program at a student, therefore they will learn, because they won't. What's going to help, what's going to make sure a student learns is effective teaching, bottom line. So I'll hand over to Ted now, and he'll take you through a little bit of what he does in the classroom. We'd like this to be an interactive session, so if there's any questions that you've got at any time, just feel free to fire those up. We plan to finish just a little before 12:15, so there'll be some time for some Q&A at the end. Okay, all good? Thanks. Ted.
All right. Well, my name is Ted Barks, and I teach year 7 and 8 over at Point England School. I share a classroom with my team leader, so my responsibilities include I'm in the classroom for half time, so I teach maths, and 20% of my position I am a maniacally facilitator. We are a school of predominantly one-to-one devices from year 4 now all the way up to year 8. So the students each work with their own netbook or a tablet or something like that. And next year we are moving even further to right from the ground up. They will be working with tablets all the way from new entrants through to year 3 with a Chromebook of some sort from year 4 through to year 8. So it is quite a unique environment. Lots of challenges with that as well. But my job as a facilitator is to go in and help teachers that are new to that one-to-one environment, help them kind of find their way and their footing. And that doesn't make me an expert, it just means that they don't have to go the journey on their own. So if they've got, they're having issues with anything, I'm alongside of them trying to help them sort it out. The other 20% of my job this year, I'm an MST teacher, so math support. So I pull a group of year 4 students who are struggling with their maths understanding. I work with them for an hour every day in a very small group. It's a really nice, neat setting, and that's kind of my story. I'm originally from Canada. We've been living here in New Zealand for 6 years. We only came for 1, but here we are. We love it. So, anyways, that's a little bit about me. I think this is the 4th year. Is that right? That we've been using Maths-Whizz? I think so. And if you were expecting a really smooth presentation, it's not going to happen because I'm trying to share with you a little bit about the journey along the way, finding my way in a digital environment. And it's been really messy. And from the start, the first year we used Maths-Whizz, man, we were finding our way in Google Docs and trying to just wade through an enormous amount of learning along with our students. And truthfully, I was lost. And so when Chris and Ross showed up and said, hey, why don't we have a look at this? I trialed it, and honestly, I looked at it as a godsend almost, because I had something that I saw some value in that my students could do on these devices that we were supposed to magically use to enhance their learning. Looking back now, I probably used it almost more as a babysitter. I hesitate to say that, but really I wasn't very involved. It was a program that was operating independent of me. Every student sits an evaluation test at the beginning, and the program actually correlates all their data and puts them into a very individualized program. So I love that. So if it was a babysitter, it was at least a good one. But I didn't interact with it, right? And that's just kind of where it stayed. And as I've used it, every year I like to think I'm a reflective individual, and I look at what I liked about the program and try to change the things that I didn't think were quite there. So anyways, that's where I'll start with you today. So whether you're using Maths-Whizz or any other program, there are a few things that I would encourage you to think about. And first and foremost, and I'm just going to keep this in a non-presentation mode, if that's all right. I'm driven to actually make sure that whatever I'm using digitally, that it can be used anytime, that it can be used any place, and that there's a pacing, that they're speeding their way through. They've got the opportunity to do that. If they need more time on it, then that actually needs to be acceptable too. So whatever you're using, that needs to be something that you at least consider. Because Lord knows when you go into the digital environment, your choice is limitless almost to the number of apps that you can use, and this game and that game, and is there value in it? Perhaps. Is there enough value for you to make it part of your program? Maybe not. And that's what you need to actually assess and evaluate. As I look at Whizz and anything else that I've got a part of my program, I'm really interested in looking at, so who's maintaining the power for learning? Does it stay with me? Come and let me bestow my knowledge on you, sort of a deal? Or is there power for the students to go and explore and see where the next step is for them and the areas that they're having difficulty with? So if it's not, if there isn't a strong degree of power that you're leaving with your students, then I also would challenge you to look at whatever digital resources you're using, and is there a way to use them slightly differently? Is there data that's being generated? You're asking your students to spend time online and in this digital environment. Is it a game? Do they just simply finish playing it and it's done and dusted? Or is there an opportunity that you as a teacher will get to look to see what they've done, what they've accomplished, and sadly, in a digital environment, perhaps what they haven't accomplished? Ross alluded to the statement of weapons of mass distraction. The online environment that we're asking our students to work in is just absolutely laced with distractions. And so if there's not an opportunity for you to kind of access what they've been doing, I think we're really doing our students and their learning a disservice. So first of all, is there data? And second of all, is it there and is it quick to access? Because I'm exactly in the same boat as each one of you, and I know how many free minutes I have in the day, and it's just nothing. So I need it quick and easy to get to. Is the data shared? And when I say that, I mean, is it just for me, or is there an opportunity for the students to actually see what they've achieved and what they haven't achieved, and that status along the way? Again, if it's not, we just need to actually have a look at it. I've posed all these as questions that I consider as I'm looking through. So you've got the data. What are you doing with it? Does it stay there, or is there an opportunity for you to establish next steps? Next steps for both you as a teacher and what you're doing with the class, as well as next steps for your students. And the whole aspect of next step for students is quite, it's quite new really in the realm of teaching, at least from a Canadian standpoint anyways. We teach whole class back in Canada, and you've got your assignments that you're more or less all working on together. And yes, there's some modification, but I'm doing the modification for the students. And yes, there's some extension, but there has been very little. It's only of late that we've really started to look towards, again, that shift in the locus of learning power being given back to the students. I actually just ran across this slide downstairs. That's why it's such a dodgy, kind of a not a pretty photo there, but I noticed it in the presentation booth. And I said, that's a slide that I've actually missed. So as part of whatever you choose to use to govern it today, yes, I'm going to be looking at Whizz a fair little bit. But from my classroom reports, I noticed that last year, overall, I was relatively happy with performance straight across the board. But this was a standout, as I obviously was missing the boat in the algebra aspect of things. And by simply looking at that data in that report, it actually allowed me to change some things this year. And will it make a difference? I guess the end of year reports will kind of tell. But we most certainly have more of a focus for that as well. At the end of the day, no matter what you choose, you still are the teacher. The programs are not going to substitute for you, and the data has to make sense. In the online environment, the digital environment, students are smart, crazy smart, and they find ways around things. You know, like it's, I'll use, how many of you have used Extra Maths at all for just a basic fax program? Have your kids discovered the hacks at all yet? See, there's hacks. It's a great little program. I'll just quickly make a detour over here. So, that's my MSD group. What it allows you to do, any of your students that are struggling in whether it's addition, subtraction, whatever, it will lead them through just those basic facts in its time. So they have 3 seconds to respond before it moves on to the next question. It gives you a report on mastery. Calvin is at 89% mastery in multiplication. DJ's at 86 in division. Once they've mastered the 3-second recall, the program actually resets and you actually move them to a 2-second recall and finally a 1.5. And that all sounds really good, except for this year. And they get certificates and everything along with it, and I was using it as part of my OTJ and helping them to steer them in the direction that they needed to go to get these skills outside of me. One of my students, well, I was actually at a conference, because you get an email every time they achieve a status. And one of my girls who'd been really struggling with her addition, and we've been working like mad on it, all of a sudden, I'm at the conference, and she was creeping closer and closer and closer. She was in that 89, 90%. And on the day that I was away, I got the certificate. Ephelona has achieved mastery of addition. And I went, yes. You know, I sent her a quick email, good on you, girl. You know, go hard. About 10 minutes later, I got an email. She just achieved mastery in subtraction. And I thought, wait a second. Right? And it doesn't excuse you as a teacher, right? If something, just because it's there, you can't ignore what fits and what doesn't fit. And that was the day that the hack was introduced, and they discovered a little shortcut that if you do this and then this, it'll actually just give you the correct answer. So I still use it. What? I still use it, but we've changed how we administer it. So when I get the email, and they get the notification that they've achieved it, they've achieved 100%. I say, good on you, congratulations. Come have a seat beside me and show me 80%. You've just achieved 100, so 80 should be easy, okay? And in the event that you don't, well, you can work with me at lunchtime until you achieve the status that you told me you could do. Do you know what I mean? So you can't ignore that, you still are the teacher. Talk a little bit about data before. So this was at the start of last year, and my kids were beavering away in Maths-Whizz as part of it. I give them 15 to 20 minutes every single day for their Maths-Whizz. Okay? We've got an hour of math, so about a quarter thereabouts of my block of time I dedicate to it. So you need to get some value for that, I feel. But it is completely individualized. Anyways, I tracked this data. This was term 1. And with me doing nothing other than giving them the opportunity to do it, of my class of 32, I had 16 of them that were achieving above the expected level. And the expected level is actually measured against you're one day older, you should advance one day further within your learning as measured against the program. I had none of them that were actually right at the line. I had 16 of them that were below. So I had, 50-50 split. I looked at that because that wasn't good enough for me to, right, when you look at it, it's like, gee, that's not that great at all. And so, term 2, again, they were given the opportunity, and I kind of amped them up, come on, you guys, we need to actually do better than this. But we still had 17 above and 15 below, so it really had shifted, but very insignificantly. And then, this is where I started coming back to looking at, all the data was mined, right? They weren't actually, they were getting the lessons and they were knowing what they were doing, but they weren't really getting a collection of the weekly progress and what they were achieving, what they weren't. And so, I actually designed a drop zone, and see if I can actually find it. So this is actually coming from our site. So from this drop zone, this is actually, depending on how familiar you are with Google Docs and whatnot, each one of these are links to an individualized presentation for each one of these students with privacy only for them. So if Gloria wants to share anything from her presentation, she has to share it. Kavina can't go into Gloria's to see what she's got, and we'll look in some of them that I've got permissions to share with you. That's where I drop, and all their parents have access to it, so that's where I drop their most current ESL results, any certificates and achievements from any of their programs, the next steps that we'll get into. That's actually kind of my launching point for that, all right? So, if we go back to, again, so from here, they didn't have the data, okay? So from here, I created, do I have the right one? I've got duplicates on. There we go. So I'm in Gloria's, and this is Maths-Whizz, all right? So this was actually the term that we just finished. And I'll bounce back to this again. But just so you kind of have an idea of, this is what I did. So every week, Friday, I actually took it as part of my after-school routine. I would actually collect their data and I would share it with them. Nothing fantastic, but it was just what I did. Based on that and that alone, all of a sudden, and that was the only thing that I did different, so again, the same amount of time. All of a sudden, I actually started to see what I actually saw as a shift. So I all of a sudden had 21 that were above, leaving 2 at, and only 9 below. And I was like, okay, well, we're getting somewhere, right? In terms of percentages, right, that's a 23% increase in the number of students that were achieving an acceleration in their learning. I started the year off with that same thing I've shared from the start of the year. And this is my crew this year, and they're no different. In fact, I have a broader range. So simply starting the year off with sharing the data this year, I'm excited to see and hope that this is actually something that I will just continue to do, because in my class of 29, I have 25 of them that are achieving above with only 3 below. And the range of my students, and we'll see these as part of WIZZ as well, I have one of my boys who's working his way through the year 9 curriculum. He's only in year 8, but he's an amazing mathematician. So he's working his way through the year 9 curriculum. And I also have one of my boys, I would be really pushing if I said that he had achieved year 3. And they're all in the same class. So the earlier statement of the huge individualized learning, I mean, how do you plan for that, right? So I think a program is in order to help us actually hopefully make sense of that. I don't know how you actually plan for your groups. How many of you teach informal math groups?
What do you mean by that?
Small groups, do you know what I mean? So all these students, but probably strategy related. As a school, that's kind of what we're expected to do. It was new to me, so I just had to do it. And it's based almost entirely on where they're at with their gloss results. And I guess the idea behind it is that that's a maturity level, that they're able to work with their numbers and they actually need that. So anyways, this was actually part of my digital journey as well. That this was the good old familiar gloss test that I collected, and when I was finished, I tucked it into my folder and recorded the results, and there was nothing that was happening with the students. So I thought, here's some more data. How can I actually give this to my students to allow them the opportunity to go on? So I started to develop a resource, and part of that resource had me stumble across a guy by the name of Mike Sleeman. Anyone familiar with him? I started to make my own videos, and the kids were complaining that they couldn't always understand what I was saying with my accent. And so he's a Kiwi guy. And I found him online, and so I just got permission from him to rip apart his resource and make it more mine. So if you notice, do you notice the gloss sort of a layout? Right? Add sub, multi, div, broke it down into year levels. And I didn't include all the strategies. I actually kind of went a nice, neat progression right up the middle. So I'll open up a couple of these so you can see before I actually show you where I've linked them. So that was year 1 add sub. Every single one of these presentations is a 4-slide presentation. The first one is red. It's kind of symbolizes the student stop. This is actually the strategy that we're wanting you to learn. The second one is yellow, which is still heavily scaffolded, with them an opportunity to kind of put it to work. And the last two are green, where the scaffolding has been pulled away, and they have to put the strategies to work in a problem-solving sort of a basis. So this is a year 1. If they're completely lost, that actually links to a YouTube video explaining the strategy. So they don't have to wait for me. Again, it comes down to where's the locus of learning power? It doesn't stay with me. They've got all this. They can go and access. They can do whatever they want. They can sit at home with mom and dad and grand and big brother, sister, whoever, and it's there. When you have such a range of students in your class, for me anyways, it's about respecting the dignity of the students that are struggling without lording it over, right? So I'll skip to one now that's actually in year at a much higher level. We'll still go add sub. All right. And they look exactly the same. The first slide is still red. They're still actually linked. And they still have to hang them in their strategy on problems, word problems. So anyways, where do we go with that? Does that kind of make sense to some of you? A little bit, yeah. So I came back here to my next step. There we go. So this is Dear Gloria. And if I focus on that slide, that's essentially her gloss results from the start of the year that we've been working on. So she's got all of her add sub strategies in place. She's quite a strong student. She hasn't had all of them in malt div, so they're coded yellow. She's still working on them, and she's kind of got her fractions and decimals percentages sorted out as well. But she knows, independent of me, what she's working on. And I develop those, and I'm teaching them to my groups and my whole class. But not that personalized, because you can't possibly do it that personalized in a small group. So anyways, that's there, and that's from right above it. If you notice, that also is where I'm sharing ESL data. She's actually got access to everything that she can hopefully use to try and plug some of those gaps. Okay? I think it's probably time to have a quick look into Whizz, and I'm just going to launch a report. I was going to make a movie of this, but I thought that was much easier to, and they assured me that the network would be fine. So, and I thought it would also show you the whole aspect of, I don't want the data if I have to wade through hours and hours of paperwork to get to whatever I'm after. So I'm after a report. And let's just go before the holidays. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to actually go from there to there, right? If I'm doing a weekly report, obviously I just actually nail the week that I'm talking about. But at a glance, So I sometimes have parents come in, hey, how's my child doing? This is almost always my first port of call. Let's have a look. They're on Whizz every day. Let's see how they're doing. And there have been some real neat bonuses that come out of having a program that you can't trust. If you can't trust it, get rid of it. That's my advice. If you can't trust the data that you're getting, don't keep it around. So when we look at this, this is actually the only column that we're interested in. I don't care who is at the highest math age. I don't care who is at the lowest math age. We are interested only in what are we doing to improve where we are in mathematics. So if we have, and I'll explain some of these ticks. So at a glance, the ticks mean one of two things. They have at least, for that time frame that you've actually plugged into your calendar, in this case it's a whole term. So for the course of that term, those students with the green tick have at least made a term's advancement in their mathematical learning. It could also mean, and we'll look at them here, that they've made more than that, right? And that is our focus every week. We've decided that our goal as a class is to accelerate our learning, and we are trying to do 2 weeks in 1 week according to this program every single week. And we don't make it, but that's our goal. So I've got a chart up in the class, and at this end, it actually says, no, I'm not accelerating my learning. The next one says, not yet. And then it says, I'm accelerating my learning, 2 weeks in 1. And then it actually says, 4 weeks in 1. And then it says 6 in 1. And believe it or not, some of them actually achieve it. It's phenomenal. We've taken the time away. So while I say I give them 15 to 20 minutes, and that was my initial focus when we first started this, hey, you owe me 15 minutes before you go out for morning tea, or whatever, and I was kind of the time Gestapo, so to say. But we've shifted from that, and it's not about time anymore. Right? Because with the hacks and the cheats, they're really good. If you fire up Maths-Whizz and have it operating and put a new window in front of it, it operates and it ticks away the time. So as a teacher, if all you're doing is looking and monitoring the time, they're going to actually get the 2 thumbs up. Good, yep, your time is good. But their learning it isn't going to happen. So you can't cheat the program out of the learning. The only way to learn is to actually do it and actually prove yourself in the test. All right? So anyways, at a glance, my eye is drawn to those 3 individuals, right? It doesn't mean you ignore the others. You look through and it's like, wow, they're doing really well. Without, I guess, and I'm going to point out a few of them to you, just so you can actually compare. Yep, okay. At the top of my screen, he is actually at the low end. I'll show you one backtrack on the screen. That's him right there. Okay, so we'll look at him, and we're going to look at this fellow right here. All right? So the difference in their ages, he's almost 8, and he's 13 and a half. So there's a significant difference between them. If you look at their growth in math, like the improvement, again, the whole individualized aspect of it, they're right here. There's him, tick, and tick. Let's actually compare the results. So Moses is almost doubling. That's the expected growth. So he got 0.19 years older over this time, but he's actually grown 0.33 in terms of the program. So he's almost doubled it. Isar's is a little bit different because he reset, and I'll explain that. He thought things were actually too easy for him. He said, can I reset it? I said, yeah, we can do that. Again, I want the power to rest with the students, and my mandate is always, if something is too easy for you, don't waste your time. You do a self-assessment. Yeah, I know what I'm doing here. I want to move on. And I advanced and I skipped up. And in this case, Isar reset the test. So it's only been 0.06 since he reset it. But he also, in that time frame, then has increased and accelerated by another 1/3. Right? So they're both accelerated. Am I happy? Yeah. They're both working on very, very different things. Okay? Mo was really struggling to split numbers. okay? And Isara is doing advanced algebra. And I think there's actually a picture of them. They often work side by side, which is really quite funny. They're good mates, and they're very, very opposite ends of the spectrum. So out of the class, in this time frame, am I worried about the whole class, or am I starting to key in on some of the specific ones, right? And that's kind of where my attention is. If we look at some of them, and if I was to extend the time period, you would find that some of them start to disappear, right? They maybe had a bad term, or they weren't quite onto it, but when you include the term before or the term before that, some of them disappear. Some of them don't, okay? Calvin will be in that position every single term. And he's a student that I struggle immensely with to keep him connected. And it's not in any one particular area. And this is one of the bonuses that I was talking about that I didn't plan for when I started with this program. What a huge, huge way to help you assess key competencies. I don't know what it's like in your class, but if I had to say the one single thing that's actually impeding progress in learning among my students, it's their lack of ability to manage themselves with their learning. Does that kind of ring true with some of you? Right? And if they could, it's like, man, they would just take off and sail. Well, if I give them 15 minutes a day, this is actually a really quick way. And I don't usually pay attention to this because, again, the time isn't there. But you can actually say, wait a second, you didn't spend any time. No wonder we actually didn't get any learning happening this week. What did you do? And I don't just growl them out. What did you do? Show me, what did you do for your learning? Let's look elsewhere. And often they can. Sometimes they can't. And just kind of where it is. Kelvin is an interesting soul in that, and again, if you're going to use digital resources, get the ones that you can trust. Hasn't always been that way. I reported lots of glitches to Whizz in the early years that actually weren't glitches. They were just students that weren't completely interested in doing the work and wanted the easy way out. His Whizz, it was not working. He was doing it, but it was not recording learning. It wasn't recording time. Nothing. And we sat for 3 days, and he was doing other things, which turned out to be, he also was one of them that had discovered a hack for extra maths. So I was seeing progress in one area, but not here, and it was on a couple of days that he wasn't actually part of my maths group. But anyways, long story short, I said, before I send in this notice to Whizz that we've got a problem, I said, tomorrow I want you to come and sit and do your maths with right beside you so I can actually watch your screen and I can make note of any glitches and stuff that are happening. And miraculously, when he sits beside me, his learning is recorded and his time is recorded, and it's not the program. It's just part of trying to help your students manage themselves in a very, very distracted world, right? So any of the helps that you can get, I say grab them. Before I bounce away from this, are there any questions along the way with this? Am I rambling? Is it good? Yeah, right.
Can I ask actually, is it connected to ESL, or are you just bringing ESL into the...
No, I brought ESL into it because that's what we used to measure at our school, is measuring, like with maniacal data that we, and so as a measuring stick, again, if I'm using all this time, because a quarter of my time to have something in the classroom, I feel like there has to be value in it. So that's what we actually, and that's why we brought it in. So we compared the growth against Maths-Whizz against a comparable growth or lack thereof in ESL.
How often do you do the ESL test?
We actually test at the start of the year and at the end of the year. And we compare the results from the end of one year to the end of the following year, if that makes sense. With the data, you can pull up all kinds of reports from these, and I'm just going to bounce back again. Where's dear Gloria? There she is. So these are reports that I get from Whizz, again, whatever you choose to use. If there's not data, I would question using it. At a glance, Gloria can actually see that in term one, she really, and she's a pretty strong student, but out of all the areas in mathematics, paper and pencil, using addition with paper and pencil methods, meaning, right, you're carrying things over, kind of the old school. She didn't really understand numbers that way. And is it a big deal? Yeah. She didn't have to pick it. If she didn't want to work on it, she could also look at some of the others. It was easy to see the measures. And as a class, I pull these up and I look for the big picture items. So I use these reports to help inform my teaching. And this year, when I look back at the whole year, we've done a much, much better job in the algebraic end of things. But I really feel like we kind of dropped the ball of measurement, you know, and there's the ugliness of that whole mess we call mathematics, right? You just feel like you're doing great in one area, and when you start to look at the data, you go, oh, yeah, okay, and I drop that. And we're struggling with measurement as a group. But that I got from these reports at this point in the year. So I start every year with them. I have to admit that I tend to spend more time assessing them at the start of the year to get my head around what are the big things that we need to get in this year. And then again, I look at them at the end of the year kind of as a reflective tool to see, so how did we do with that. But I share those with the students. Again, this is from the Tracking My Success. There's always a direct link every single week from our site to this for the students. I don't want it to be a one-off at the end of the term. I want it to be ever present in their thinking. So this is term 2. This is, yep, that's right. So that's the start of the term. This is the end of the term. This blue indicates the shift in their learning. So the longer the color change, it's actually easy for them to see, I guess, some of the areas that they can be incredibly proud of. If you look at the top one, there was that paper and pencil addition that was one of her weaknesses. If you find it here, that's where it was. It's actually now grown to be one of her strengths. And that didn't have anything to do, per se, with me. It was just, that's the beauty of the individualized program, that it knows what the weaknesses are, and it actually takes them and it weaves them through. And they have to prove themselves on the test before they move on. Which is going to bring me to the next thing. Because when I started with Maths-Whizz, man, that was time that you spent by yourself. Right? Because it's your program, it's just for you. But we've shifted from that, and whether or not that's supported by Whizz or not, but that's how I use it. We learn together. If I want to team up with Roberta and learn something, Roberta, I'm learning this. You know, let's team up. She might be able to help me with it, she might not, but we're going to learn something together. Just because we learn together in the questions doesn't actually mean that it affects my data, because I still have to prove myself on the test. So they team up, often 2 and 3 around a single computer where they're all kind of all learning similar things. And they're just A-okay, that they know they're getting the knowledge in place, and when it comes to the test, they'll be able to prove themselves and move on to the next level. They just so aren't bothered by it, because and it's new. As I've shifted away from the time and placed the emphasis on the learning and what are you doing about it, what they've done with their Math-Whizz time has shifted considerably. It used to be everyone would find quiet spaces to work, and they were just kind of busy beavering away. And now you often have 2 and 3 huddled around a computer with a whiteboard or whatever, working things out and taking pictures that they may or may not post to their blogs, demonstrating something that that they are learning on Whizz. But it has shifted. They can focus that learning outside of Whizz on any of these areas as they determine as weaknesses from some of these, I guess, bits and pieces of data that I've given. Same with this, right? So where do they go for that? Because you can't specifically link to the lessons in Whizz, which I've actually been cracking about, haven't I? I felt that as a teacher, if my algebra, the algebraic thinking among my students is really weak, there's great activities within the program. How do I link to them in a digital environment? How can I send them a link and say, this is the activity that I want you to work on? You can't do it yet. But that's one thing about this particular company, that while they don't have it all sorted, they actually listen to me, and I've had conference calls with them, and all they did was sit and listen to me blabber on about all the things that I wish were different. And as a teacher, I appreciate that, because I don't have it all sorted. But when you look to see how could I make it better, it's nice to at least think that somebody's kind of listening to you. So it's way better than it was when we started. And with some of the proposed changes, I think it'll be even better, because that's one of the things that they're doing. It's not directly linked and compared back to the New Zealand curriculum. You go, yikes, how does that work? Well, again, it's not your whole maths program, right? It really isn't. Maths is very sequential though, right? And so while it may not measure back against the New Zealand curriculum, it does measure against mathematical learning. And if you, again, it shouldn't be your whole program, it can't be your whole program. And if any one program is your whole program, I would consider, or I would most certainly encourage you to step back from it and check things out, because we're probably missing a few things. Yeah?
Is it metric? Do you use a metric system, or is it use?
No, it uses metric system. The only thing that has proved to be a problem, and within measurement, is the money, right? And for some of my lower students that struggle already with our, to include pounds and pence, it's really difficult for them. So I've encouraged them to look at it, ignore the pricing and how it may relate to the cost of something, and pretend that pounds is dollar sign. And do you know what I mean? Like, it's still base 10. But there are times when I just simply look and I say, you know what? Let's skip you over that. And we'll just keep skipping you over that until we actually get to, we'll work on that separately. So it's a flaw. And it is one of the things that I've requested. If it's something that we're going to have in New Zealand, then let's make it New Zealand. Right? So again, they listened, and we're moving in the right direction. At the end of last year, I looked and I thought, I love what I'm doing with all this data that I'm sharing with my students. I feel like they know where they're going. I feel like I gave them a great resource from a strategy perspective in linking their gloss results on it. I gave myself a big pat on the back for that. But when I looked at the whole year, I thought, okay, well, now that they've got all of these, they can see what still needs to be achieved from their ESTL testing. They can actually see areas of strength and weakness in the data that they're getting from Maths-Whizz. So where do they go with that, right? Yeah, Gloria can look at this, and which one is my most current one? Oh, look at that, I put two of them on there. Anyway, so she can look at this and go, okay, well, my areas of weakness, okay, there's my measurement. Paper and pencil multiplication. So as a teacher, I know that our classes here is weak in measurement. What have I given her to allow her the opportunity to move on? So that's where I've spent a lot of time this year, and I'm not finished it yet. I don't like everything, but I will share that with you. Got too many windows. There we go. So what I did here, through the help of some online resources, I started to target some of what are perceived to be the big areas, and I just created a database for them. Okay, so that's kind of what I started. And some of them are linked to some IXL. Some of them are linked to Study Ladder. Some of them are linked to little mini presentations that I've made where and some of the things that I've linked to, we're not members, so we only have a limited amount of time over the course of any day that we can, in fact, work on. So in year 8, with number theory in particular, there are some key things that they're expected to know. One of them is divisibility rules, and one of them is multiplicative inverses. And so I've shared this presentation. She can scroll through everything and anything she wants. It's quite an extensive knowledge presentation with links everywhere. So they've got a lot of choice. What do you want to learn about? You know, what's next? They've got next steps all the way through. But it allows me to actually fine tune them. So for Gloria, I've actually gone through and anything that's shaded in blue. It's funny that I use all these colors because I am colorblind, but I know it's blue. Anything that's shaded in blue is something that when I look at all of her data with her, it's something that she's missing out on. She just doesn't quite have it. So when she looks in this whole big, massive presentation of knowledge that on its own, man, students get lost, teachers get lost in that, right? So it gives them anything that's highlighted in yellow is something that they probably want to pay a little more attention to. I'm going to be working on those with them as a teacher. But if they're working independently, anything in yellow is probably a good place to start. And anything in blue is a really good place for them to actually continue to work on to achieve. One of the things that I was missing as part of Maths-Whizz was a reflective component. And that came out in various ways. And we tried it with little mini presentations. Can I plug in here? Where is mine? Sorry, guys. So one of the ways that I tried to combat this
which equals 3 squares.
Was that your saying?
So, so as part of the reflective component, I wanted them to get good at, not necessarily showcasing, but being okay with not having something done and dusted. There was almost a sense of shame when they didn't have something, didn't understand it, and there was almost an internalizing of, I'm no good at this. And so I was trying to shift that to, I still have to learn. This is something that I'm still working on. And so we created a couple different presentations that we added to over the course of the year. One of them was, I'm great at this, and one of them was labeled, I'm still learning. So this is one of the things that he decided to put in that he was great at. And
one area is 1 square, so that's 1 square, 2 squares, and 2 triangles make up 1 square, which equals 3 squares.
so,
Like I said before, that's 1 square, which is 1 area, 2 area, 3 area, 4 area, and 2 triangles is 1 area, so 5 areas.
so this was part of their Maths-Whizz time. And it was just an opportunity for them to reflect a little bit more, because I was missing out on that time there when they were just working in the program. I mean, obviously I wandered and, you know, and I was privy to lots of conversation, but more so when they were having trouble. Mr. Barks, I need a hand with this. But this is actually one of them that,
Today I thought I'd do a quick video about a math problem that I'm still learning
you not hear that?
about measures.
And all they've done, they've just gone in QuickTime and they've just done a screen capture while they've been
Immediately,
working
0.4 kg stand out to me. So I'll start with that. I don't know, like, because I know I think it's that one and that one, but I don't know, like, what to say. I know that 0.4 kgs isn't the same as 40 grams. And I know it's not the same as 4,000 grams, 444 kgs, and 800 grams. But I'm pretty sure that it's 4 kgs and 4,000 grams, because 1 kg has 1,000 grams.
So he ends up working his way through that. And if we were to watch it through, he ends up coming to one where he is completely stumped. And he pauses and he says, yeah, and this is where I get stuck. I just don't quite have it sorted yet. Is there value in it? Yeah. Could you do this with any program? Yeah, it's a screen capture, right? And it's just another way to incorporate that reflective component. And that's actually what drove me when I was looking to make, get the right one up here. When I was putting together this knowledge component with some of the digital resources that are out there that you don't have access to with memberships, because you don't have to buy membership and everything, because there's a cost factor. But I wanted to capture it somehow. So when Gloria worked with prime composite numbers, she's got it done and dusted. And if I've asked her to make a DLO for it, she could. DLO being a digital learning object, something that demonstrates. It's kind of like what we just watched. That would be classified as DLO. In terms of greatest common factor, that's her assessment online. That's all personal assessment. She's having great difficulty with it. And it could be for a number of reasons. She's just started it. It could be that she hasn't worked on it for a long time and is just really struggling. But in her opinion, she's having some difficulties with it. When I meet with her, make sure I have the right one. I've actually, we've tried really hard to actually put together some graphs for some of them and link them back to just various things that we've got going on as a measure of, does it make sense? And it's not, well, you know what, it is checking out. Because if you've got a student that goes through and puts all those green, good to go, good to go, good to go, good to go, and as a teacher you look at them and you go, wait a sec, none of that is coming through when I'm working with them, where is it? Right? So there has to be a measuring up. So the graphs that I sit down with them and we make and we reflect, they actually should line up when we check out the lessons, we ask them questions, and it is a check for them. Anyways, that's what I'm putting in place to address some of the knowledge deficit. So when Gloria is in any of the devices that are the programs that we're using online, and she pinpoints that I'm really not that great at, operations with decimals, integers, fractions. There's my exponents and square roots, ratios and proportions, percentages. She's got a place to start, right? So if we go back to the earliest slide that we started with, are there the next steps, right? Have I provided them for them, or are they there for the student, right? The beauty with Maths-Whizz, the next steps are inherent. right? They really are. Unlike a lot of them that I've tried, and this isn't a sales pitch, it's just some observational ramblings, I suppose. Some of them are too much work for me. I don't have time to sit down with 32 students and say, okay, this is what they need here. Kind of like how many of you study library? Okay, it's really taxing sometimes if you're trying to individualize them, isn't it? Right? Okay, that's a good one for them, not so much that one. Right? And you go through and it's like, oh my goodness, this program looks after it all. Again, if it's not the only place they're learning, you have to be prepared with what they sat the test initially at, and it saw them struggling with an area. You may have taught that right outside of that, so when they finally sit that in Maths-Whizz, they've grown immensely, if that makes sense. It's too easy for them, but give them permission to don't do anything that's easy. Right? Skip over. We're in the business of getting as much learning crammed in as possible, and hopefully having some fun along the way. Anyways, I think that's kind of me. The other thing that I've incorporated as part of our site, I actually just created this as part of my drop-down menu, and I just said I need some help with maths. Dropped a little form in there that they fill out, and it's open. Again, the whole idea of trying to not showcase, but be okay with the fact that I don't get this. I'm having some trouble with this, as opposed to trying to slink away and hide it and be ashamed by that. And by having it open, it's amazing how many of them get sorted outside of me. Because they go on there and say, oh yeah, I know that, and they team up. And I don't know, it was a neat addition. And when they're having trouble, that's kind of the expected first stopping point. Did I get a chance to, have I tried to sort it with someone? Have I don't know, just a reflective component. But I think that's probably what I would actually challenge you with, is that no matter what you're using, that you come back to, are you getting the most value for it? How are you using it? How are you using it for yourself? How are you using it for your students? Can you actually utilize that program in some way, shape, or form to help you legitimize an OTJ? OTJs they're hard, aren't they? You have 2 people, 3 people sitting down with the same child, and there can be some real discrepancy. I think the more data you have to go back on, the better it is. And I don't know if you're any different than I am, but I have my likes. And when I look at the massive curriculum that I'm faced with teaching every year, I make choices. Okay, that's probably not quite as important as this, right? Don't wait, you're kind of all doing it, it's kind of time constraints, and you pick out the most important things. If you're utilizing programs online, get a program that actually takes your likes out of the formula, and it takes them through every single area. So when you sit down to do your OTJ, it's not just what you've worked on with. You've got, oh, okay, this is the big broad area. This is where they are in gloss. Wow, we did really well in gloss. But wait a sec. They're still really quite low. Right? I haven't taught it. Anyways.
I love data, and I love data analysis. And so the school that I'm at, we're Decile 6, we're about 33% Māori. The 2 junior classes I teach are just over 50% Māori. So I decided as part of my teachings inquiry this year, I would look at Māori underachievement. Using those 2 words in the same sentence actually draws hackles on my back, because I see no data that links genetics with achievement. But anyway, I was told that I had to do that. So I posed the question, why are Māori underachieving in my classes? And the first suggestion I came up with was attendance. So I had a look at attendance. Remember, my classes are around 50% Māori, and so I've got a reasonable sample size. And I found, interestingly enough, there was no difference in Māori attendance and non-Māori attendance in my classes. I did find that there was a correlation between attendance and achievement. but actually there was no appreciable difference between Māori and non-Māori achievement. Attendance, beg your pardon. Then I looked at achievement, and this is where I pulled Whizz data from, because Whizz will give me improvement in mathematical ability. And the other thing I found was that there was no appreciable difference between Māori and non-Māori achievement. So I like that about Whizz. Have you still got your site open? If you could just go to your class report, just addressing some of the questions that came up earlier. Somebody said the spread of abilities. So on Ted's dashboard, he showed us that in his class he has students ranging from a maths age of 8 up to 13 and a half. So it's typical that there is a 4-year age spread, and that's that timeline at the top there. So another question that came up was time. So how do you cater for that in a class? How do you cater for a 4-year age range? Okay, so here we have individualised program, and then and so my time, and I've taken a lot of what Ted's done and brought that into my own teaching. So I have those presentations as well. If you want to have a look in more detail, then if you see Ted around the conference, or if you come and have a chat to me at the stand, I can certainly open that up and have a look.
Can I piggyback on that just for a sec, Russ? If you remember Kelvin from my class, right, who's just really struggling? We don't pay attention or haven't really focused a whole lot on the usage, but from the class dashboard, that gives you the layout of the whole class, their age. If you click on the usage, it actually shows you, so over the, who's actually using it the most, who's actually using it the least. And I know without any hesitation that dear boy is Kelvin right there. Right, he just doesn't use it. And again, it's the whole aspect of being distracted and right, great kid, but he's just lots of distraction.
Ted, can you click on topics tab, please? So at a glance, Ted will be able to see at the beginning of the year whereabouts his classes were. So if he was wanting to know anything in terms of what do I need to do specially, I know I take the point, this term we're doing add sub, next term we're doing multi div, and but there's got to be some scope in there. So at a glance we can see that progression report by our particular class.
So next area for me to probably look at seriously would be properties and numbers and trying to just build that whole concept in there.
Anybody here done NZC student engagement surveys? Okay, we do those biannually. They're very, very interesting. You pay, but I think NZC has got a stand downstairs. Extremely valuable data again to inform my teaching. And we've identified over a number of years in school issues with student engagement. And one thing that I've pulled out of my own personal data is increased levels of engagement. And I'd have to trace it back to sharing the data with the students, giving the data to the students. This is not my data, this is your data, and I want you to reflect on it.
And setting goals.
Yeah.
Setting those goals, and that's one thing that I've asked Whizz to change within the program themselves, to allow the students to set goals for themselves. Not for some of them it could be time, but for most of them hopefully it'll be on the learning and the learning achievement. Without those goals, it's just too easy for it to become a task. And you're finishing a task as opposed to learning. That makes sense.
And my final comment will be just on OTJs. I was at a cognition conference, and just recently a comment was made in one of the keynotes. There is no tool, and this gets back to the national standards data, there is no tool in New Zealand that aggregates data across the strands. And I'm going, yes there is. So here we've got with this that dotted line there. This is Ted's class, but if we went to a student progression tab, that maths age that we talk about is actually an aggregation of their performance across all strands.
One of the things that, there are just so many things that we've talked about, and so many things that we've missed. Every week, because we celebrate, and this is the data that I shared, there are 3 students in the class that are the top. So we actually have, so as part of the drop zone, in week 8, term 3, Gloria was actually the bronze.
This is not the top students, this is the top in terms of improvement.
Okay,
yeah.
And if I was to pop back here to our dear boy Mo, right? Week 6, turn 3. Mo was the bronze. So you've got the engagement at both ends, and as long as you're celebrating that improvement, you're not separating and segregating